The roar of engines, the smell of burning rubber, and the cheers of a roaring crowd. This was Heavy D. Sparks' world. But behind the grease-streaked smiles and the loud, larger-than-life persona, a storm was building. A storm that would shatter everything he had fought to build. One night, after a routine shoot for Diesel Brothers, a confrontation ignited that no camera would capture. Whispered betrayals, hidden resentments, and a secret that could destroy not just his career, but the man he thought he knew himself to be. Fans adored his bravado, yet nobody saw the isolation gnawing at him, the sleepless nights haunted by mistakes and pressures he could not speak of. How does someone who built a public empire of strength and chaos suddenly vanish from the world that loved him? And what dark truth was buried behind the grease-stained smiles? This is the story of Heavy D. Sparks, not the legend but the man behind the machinery. The small towns of Oklahoma stretched endlessly under a sun that burned the earth like molten metal. Dust curled through the air, coating everything in a thin film of grit, and the scent of motor oil hung heavy over the garage where Heavy D. Sparks first learned the rhythm of engines. As a boy, he moved among wrenches, sprockets, and steel, his fingers nimble with a talent that drew admiration and envy in equal measure. His father, a man of strict rules and harsh words, often demanded perfection, and the boy internalized the tension, translating it into determination. Every bolt tightened was a lesson, every engine rev a declaration. He would be seen. Even in his earliest years, there was a storm beneath the surface. Heavy D's confidence, brash and unshakable, masked a simmering insecurity that whispered every night as he lay on his mattress in the dimly lit bedroom, the hum of distant engines like a lullaby of both comfort and isolation. He longed for recognition, for proof that his efforts mattered, not just in the eyes of strangers, but in the fleeting approval of a father who was often absent in spirit if not in body. By his teens, he was a local phenomenon. Trucks, bikes, and machinery seemed to obey him, bending to his skill in ways that drew crowds of curious onlookers. The local garage became his stage, every repair and modification a performance, every successful engine a fleeting triumph over a world that could feel both small and suffocating. Yet for all the admiration, a gnawing loneliness lingered. Heavy D watched friends drift away, family dynamics twist into sharp edges, and began to understand the price of brilliance. Isolation. When the Diesel Brothers discovered him, cameras already pointed at roaring engines and adrenaline-fueled chaos. They saw raw energy, a performer whose personality could fill screens. But the world would never see the cracks forming beneath the grease-stained smile, the whispered self-doubt, the fear of inadequacy, and the silent battles fought behind closed doors. His talent promised a meteoric rise, yet the very traits that made him indispensable, the intensity, the unyielding confidence, the thirst for recognition, would also be the very sparks that ignited future conflict. And as the lights went up, engines roared, and cameras rolled. Heavy D remained unaware that the first fractures in his carefully constructed armor were already taking shape, invisible yet inevitable. The roar of cameras, the squeal of tires, the gleaming chrome under studio lights. It was intoxicating. Heavy D. Sparks had stepped into a world where his every action could be replayed and celebrated, where the applause of fans and the gasps of astonishment fueled a rush like no other. Yet behind every triumphant roar, there was a silence, a shadow lurking in corners no spotlight could touch. In the garage, surrounded by trucks taller than men, he would often pause mid-wrench, staring at a bolt as if its metal could speak the truths he refused to acknowledge aloud. Friendships, once casual and effortless, began to fray under the pressures of fame. Trust became fragile. Laughter on set often masked whispers in hallways. Heavy D's larger-than-life persona, once his armor, now became a mask, concealing exhaustion, anxiety, and the gnawing ache of isolation. He felt like a performer trapped in a loop. The world demanded energy, charisma, and chaos, but inside him, a storm raged that no wrench or engine could quiet. The cameras caught adrenaline, excitement, camaraderie, but never the nights he lay awake, replaying words spoken in anger, decisions made too quickly, alliances betrayed silently in shadows. The Diesel brothers' fame machine roared onward, but with every viral moment, Heavy D felt a quiet erosion of self. The applause that once made him feel invincible now echoed off walls he couldn't penetrate. He began to understand that recognition is fragile, and loyalty even more so. Every handshake carried the weight of hidden agendas, every laugh the possibility of betrayal. And amid this world of roaring engines and flashing lights, a secret festered, a truth Heavy D carried alone, one that could unravel his carefully curated persona, leaving him exposed in ways the public could never forgive. Even as he smiled for the cameras, every photograph captured only half the man he had become. The confident, fearless Heavy D Sparks on the surface, and beneath, a fractured soul wrestling with anxiety, resentment, and a gnawing sense of inevitable collapse. The world adored him, yet, at the height of his fame, Heavy D Sparks stood on a precipice, a man surrounded by applause yet haunted by the echo of silence. On set, he was unstoppable. Engines roared, cameras panned, fans cheered, but off camera, the world he thought he knew began to fracture. Betrayal came quietly at first. A missed call, a passing glance, a withheld word, and then it struck with the force of a hydraulic press. Someone he had trusted implicitly, a partner in every sense of the word, had begun undermining him in ways too subtle for the world to notice but sharp enough to wound deeply. The garage became both sanctuary and prison. Each truck rebuild, each engine rev, was punctuated by moments of doubt, moments where he questioned every decision he had made, every relationship he had invested in. Heavy D wrestled with rage, shame, and disbelief. The betrayal was not just professional. It was personal, cutting through layers of loyalty, leaving raw, bleeding edges of trust that could never fully heal. He found himself watching friends, co-workers, even fans, through a lens of suspicion, wondering who might be watching, waiting to exploit a mistake. The cameras still rolled, capturing charisma, humor, and confidence. But behind every scene was a man silently calculating, strategizing, bracing for the inevitable collapse that loomed like a storm cloud over the horizon. Nights were spent pacing the garage, staring at trucks and shadows, hearing the engine hum as a cruel reminder of both his genius and his vulnerability. Every decision felt like navigating a minefield. Every conversation was a potential explosion. He began to understand the harshest lesson fame can teach. The higher you rise, the lonelier the apex, and the sharper the knives poised just beyond the frame. As the Diesel brothers' empire swelled, Heavy D Sparks realized the cruel irony of his success. His greatest achievements had become the backdrop for his deepest fears. Every accolade, every viral moment, was a whisper reminding him of the fragility beneath his armor. And as trust shattered around him, a question echoed in his mind with relentless intensity. Could the empire survive without him, or was the man who had built it already obsolete in the eyes of those he trusted most? The world moved on, but Heavy D Sparks remained suspended in limbo. Social media feeds scroll endlessly with memories of his triumphs. Smiling alongside co-stars, lifting engines, waving to crowds. But he was absent, retreating into shadows where the hum of engines became both comfort and torment. Isolation forced introspection. Guilt and regret became constant companions. He replayed mistakes, imagined betrayals, and questioned the foundations of every relationship he had built. Each night in the darkened garage, surrounded by tools that once gave him joy, he confronted a profound truth. Fame had come at a cost far greater than he had anticipated. Yet in that darkness, a spark of resilience ignited. Heavy D began to reclaim his life, not by seeking the applause he once craved, but by rediscovering the craft that had first made him whole. Every turn of a wrench, every engine brought to life, became a meditation on control, focus, and identity. He confronted demons that had haunted him for years, the fear of betrayal, the sense of inadequacy, the loneliness masked by bravado, and slowly began to find equilibrium. The journey was neither linear nor painless. Old relationships required confrontation, new alliances demanded patience, and the public he had once entertained waited with bated breath, unaware of the inner rebuilding. Each day felt like a negotiation with the past, a careful balance between self-preservation and self-rediscovery. Through the hum of engines and the lingering scent of motor oil, he learned that the essence of his craft was not fame, but mastery, and that mastery could coexist with humanity, vulnerability, and even forgiveness. Yet the question persisted. Could Heavy D reconcile the man he had become with the image the world still remembered? Every glance in the mirror reflected the duality he had learned to live with: the bold, fearless persona that cameras loved, and the private man grappling with scars both seen and unseen. As he began to navigate this delicate terrain, the thrill of possibility mingled with the shadow of memory, a reminder that rebirth is never free of echoes from the time has a way of reshaping memory, and for Heavy D Sparks, the years beyond the Diesel Brothers spotlight brought both clarity and melancholy. He walks now in a world that remembers him as a larger-than-life figure, a man whose bravado and talent captivated fans. But the man himself carries a more complex story, one of resilience forged in the fire of betrayal, isolation, and relentless self-examination. The empire of trucks, engines, and fame remains behind him, yet its echoes linger in every turn of the wheel, every metallic clank reverberating like a memory he cannot escape. He has rebuilt, but differently, quieter, deliberate, informed by lessons only suffering can teach. Friends who once drifted away now approach with tentative respect. Rivals who challenged him have become measured allies. Heavy D has learned the true value of loyalty, of choosing battles wisely, and of honoring craft over acclaim. Engines still roar under his hands, yet the thrill is tempered with mindfulness. Each rev is a meditation, a reminder of control reclaimed after chaos. Even in solitude, there is beauty. Heavy D reflects on the fragility of trust, the fleeting nature of public adoration, and the permanence of reputation. The public sees confidence and charm, but inside him, the residue of past fears lingers, the awareness that every triumph carries the shadow of potential failure. He recognizes now that legacy is not the sum of fame or fortune, but the impact left quietly on those who truly witness both the victories and the vulnerabilities. In moments of reflection, he allows himself the rare luxury of satisfaction. Not for the cameras, not for applause, but for enduring. He has survived the industry, the betrayals, the inner demons, and the collapse of public identity. His story is no longer just about engines or fame, but about transformation, about the quiet victories that unfold in the absence of spotlights. The man who vanished from television has emerged in full dimension. Scarred, resilient, introspective, yet unmistakably alive. The horizon stretches ahead, a ribbon of asphalt and memory. Heavy D Sparks knows the past will never fully release him, nor would he want it to. The experiences, the pain, and the triumphs have shaped the man who stands here today. And as the engine roars beneath his hands one last time, the sound carries more than mechanical power. It carries a question, a promise, and a reckoning. What will the next chapter demand of him?